Hello everyone and welcome. Yes, my name is Arrowfire. Welcome back to another episode of Look Out and Shout. And we're going to get right on it. Today we are reviewing Fanstoys FT-32B Wright, their version of a G1 Scavenger. This time I'm not going to make a fool out of myself like I did with Gary. I actually did some research as to who Wright is supposed to be, and it is Frank Lloyd Wright, the American architect. These are all going to be architects we are led to believe. The box itself is nice, typical Fanstoys design on the front, and on the back you have your more product shots along with Gary, who's already been released, and a short biopic as well. And of course you too can pick up your own copy of this from Primetime Toys, who sent this to me and put in a lovely comic style leaflet. Yeah, very nice, same generation too, with the rebranding at Primetime. Remembering as well for your first order to get 10% off to use the code POWERUP10. This was very nicely thrown in. I do love the design, guys. It's very sharp. Very nice. Inside the box comes the figure itself, along with a collector's card with stats on the back, a booklet with the instructions. Although on the back there is a QR code to take you to video instructions, as well as a gun and a trumpet. Of course there's a trumpet. Without further ado, let's get into it. And there he is in his robot mode. It is very nice out the box. You do get that very polished, high-end Fanstoys quality. But yep, that is also a rather large backpack, and I'll cover that more in, well, final thoughts and closer ups. But it's by no means bad. The paint does hit you, very striking, very nice. Maybe a bit better than Gary, maybe. Lovely materials, lovely weight. There's good stiffness on the joints. It certainly doesn't feel like it's going to fall over, and I did think it would with the backpack on it. The figure is fine enough. I do not think Scavenger is the most prettiest of the Constructicons. I feel like he's got a bit of a rubbish head on the go, but, you know, that's by the by. Otherwise, it's very stocky. Again, I feel this is made with the combined mode in mind. I do think from looking at the images and just getting it in hand that modes have been sacrificed. He is very square. He's very backpack. And he's very much going to be made to take weight of an arm and to be a very thick upper arm than, say, maybe a slender Constructicon, maybe with him being largely arm-based with the crane and then thinner legs for treads. He doesn't carry a lot of bulk in the Scavenger design, and this does, but again, it's to be a blocky arm with a blocky Masterpiece combiner. By no means bad. I do like how the arm folds up on the back of it, even if that is a very noticeable square backpack. It is just kind of stuck there. I mean, I can forgive the aerial bots because the plane stuff's got to go somewhere, but he's going to be an excavator, a crane, not exactly the most kibble hanging design, I think is the phrase I'm looking for. But does have that nice Fanstoys quality, especially when you get it out of the box. Let's get in for a closer look. So you see as I bring him to the camera, it's got that typical high-end quality, very dark red used on the visor. Doesn't really come across on camera. There is a sheen to it, but it is very dark, and it's surrounded by largely a black head as well. I think that face is just, it's a silly box mouth, isn't it? So it's not an attractive design of all of them. It doesn't have a mouthpiece as such, not like Scrapper. It's a bit of a silly one, but it does it well enough. He's got what is going to be obviously the arm port for his chest, but again, it's very akin to the toy. He comes with his gun already in hand. Now his gun, I'll quickly touch on it if I get the arm up. I really like that. I think that's really good. Now obviously it's going to be taken very much from the designs, but I think that barrel of sights just gives it a bit more character, where I've said this before, Transformers guns can just be very generic blasters, and that just gives it a bit of definition, a bit of ownership to it, a bit like Han Solo's gun. It's just got that characteristic to stand out a bit more than a generic blaster. Coming down, legs are nice enough. They do look a bit basic, I suppose, just a continuous tread, but they do have a nice bend. I'll show you the bend whilst we're here. Good ratchets for a 90 degree, maybe a tad over, but you'll hit the back. Very stiff, and they do very much lock back into place, but of course these are going to be not tank treads, but treads for the vehicle mode. I did think the feet would be a bit rubbish. There's a lot of weight, but they hold quite nicely. And again, I'll show you articulation. It's more of well, it is an ankle tilt. It almost looks like a toe tilt with the heel folding up inside the foot. And quite helpfully, it says R and L on the other side of it, just so you know which is which. And to get it open, you just push that down and pull it out. But I'm pleased to say stability is not a problem here. despite the weight of the figure, and there is a fair bit of weight here, and as you can imagine, it's all on the back. Speaking of, let's have a look at the back of the figure. It's very unattractive. I think they could have maybe done a better job with cascading a few bits down. I get this cab was probably always going to be here, and obviously the digger arm is as well, but I kind of look at all of this and it's very apparent. He's wider than his body, and I think that is a real shame. I don't think there's anything you need to do to tidy it up outside of the box. I had one of these side hinges that was down a little bit, and I had to put it back to cascade it back. But otherwise, you do see it peering over the top of the shoulders on the underside. It's very there, and this is where I feel it's sacrificed a little bit. And okay, as I keep saying, combiners are triple changes. It's got 3 modes to house, also as of which this is the combiner fist, which I didn't think it was at first, and I thought it was not packaged in the box. I had a mild heart attack there. But that is going to be the fist for Devastator, which is living in the centre of the body. So I like that. Good bit of storage for an otherwise large piece of kit. And I do like how the arm is cascaded all the way back. It's not as arched out as I thought it could be. But that being said, it is a very unattractive back panel. And it very much is a panel. And sadly, that will cost it some points. I just think it could have been tidied up a bit more. Even though I don't hate it. I really don't hate it. I do feel, though, that this is just a very, very large design. You'll see more when I do comparisons, but he's standing so tall. I'm going to put him alongside MP36, and you'll see what I mean. Just to finish off with some articulation, as I say, he's got friction out on the arms, which I'm a little surprised at. Friction out, very stiff friction at the shoulder out. I think it's friction. Yeah, it doesn't feel ratchet to me. Bicep rotation. Looks a bit funny when you've got that break, but is what it is. Elbow, a little over 90 degrees. Could have been maybe a double elbow perhaps. Wrist rotation starts to get a little tight. Neck rotation, I'll show you this quickly. Can look up a little bit, but he starts to hit his back kibble a little bit, but he still can get some upward motion. Can look down well enough, that's not too bad. And side to side is pretty good. And shock horror, no waist rotation. At least I haven't come across any. It's very fused across with supporting everything in place. Yeah, a bit of a shame. No ab crunch either. Again, not really surprised if there's no waist rotation, there won't be an ab crunch. Legs, hips look a little funny being that far down, but good ratchets out. Stronger knee bends, almost a bit too strong. And as I say, you get an ankle rotation, so he will hold a wide stance for things, which is pretty good. You've seen the promotional shots. He will hold a almost James Bond-esque stance, I should say. Yeah, he's got the basics. Okay, we're back to this bullshit. All right. This trumpet that he comes with, I'll show you it more up close in a second. Now, I do not believe there are any double elbows on this. I don't think you pull it out to get any better mobility. And as such, just like with Gary, there's only so much of a bend you can do, and there's no wrist tilt, if you like. So it's kind of a 90-degree flat with a slight turn in is the best I can get it. And he still can't put it to his mouth. That's kind of the best I could do. So if I move it up any higher, he'll start to push it to his forehead. And Gary was the same. I just, come on, Fanstoys. This is simple now. You've done it on 2 figures and you're making yourself look silly. Now, X-Transbots very much copied this. I love the housery that's going on. But the fact that X-Transbots threw in some trumpets, but their trumpets are very much lesser by comparison, and they do not plug in well at all. This does plug in well, although when you move the arm, just like with Gary, it can dislodge it, but it doesn't fall out the hand if you get the fingers wrapped around. That's fine, but I can't then arch it properly to the mouth, and it's... Oh, come on, look from that side. You can see kind of how much worse it is and how you've got to tilt. I cannot see a better way of doing it. Look at the bend on the elbow and how far back I've come. I can't arch it anymore. And yeah, you'd sort of tilt a little bit and that's it. And I've just, yeah, I think that's a very poor attempt. Yes, it's a gimmick, so it's not going to be the end of the world, but how hard is it? How hard is it to make a trumpet to arch up to I don't know, 45-degree angle, and to at least be in line with a mouthpiece. I'll show you the trumpet up close. Very nice metal to it, very quite weighty. There's the peg you can hold in either hand. Yeah, it is a nice piece. Just wish he could angle it a bit more to his mouth and actually do the pose that this gimmick has been entirely put in for. And that's about it, so on to some comparisons. Here he is alongside X-Transbot's Scrapper, their ground bite. So again, we are seeing a very stark difference in size here. I do think this is a better scale range. I think it works better when you compare to other Masterpiece offerings. I don't hate the chonk. I like chonky bots. I'm happy with that. But I just feel when you do all comparisons to other Masterpieces, and you'll see it in a minute, it's just maybe a bit too big for a 6-bot set. But they do look good together. And for the here and now, I may even store them side by side. I want to say there's similarities. There is and there isn't. There are different approaches here. Certainly are different approaches in paint. I don't hate it, but I still feel for now X-Transbots is winning this war, but it is a war that they're going to. It's quite interesting though when you see the difference, and yeah, how you get side by side for these two figures is quite telling. Now this is very telling. Here he is alongside Takara's MP36 and Robot Paradise Fanstoys Soundwave. Now I've got him ever so slightly leaning forward, but still, look how much he's on par with Soundwave. For scale, for me, I don't think that's right. I think the Scrapper that you just saw of X-Transbots scales better. Okay, he is shorter than Megatron, but he still rivals him a bit close. I do feel the Constructicons, as a 6-bot set with no torso bot as such, shouldn't be that tall. By no means do I hate it, and it really does carry the Fanstoys quality, but when you put it alongside the larger Masterpiece offerings, that 9 to 10 inch scale, I don't think combiner teams should be that high. Unless you're starting to get into Motormaster, Onslaught, Silverbolt, maybe, but no, for me, that is still just a bit too large. But again, they're making it, yes, to this high-end scale that they seem to do, Fanstoys, almost regardless of figures, unless you're talking about mini-bots. Headmasters of the Beast, Lupus, Chomp, they're on the higher-end side anyway. But going from the cartoon and the Sunbow scale, they should not be this tall. They should not be up to this height. They're certainly bigger than the Cassette, certainly bigger than Reflector and the Insecticons, but they're maybe not as tall as Soundwave. That is quite an obvious one to me. Now, as I say, I no longer have Gary in the collection, so here's a picture I have on side it. You'll see I reviewed it previously. I by no means hate the designs, but I do think the X-Transbots version of Scrapper is better than Gary. But there's things about Gary I do like. I like the definite build. I certainly like the head sculpt, even if it is very square. The colours, though, I wasn't wild on the silver legs and even the hip skirts of Gary. I felt it looked very plain, unfinished perhaps, and the legs with that beautiful reflective paint used for Scavenger just gives it a little bit more life. I'm not a fan of the kind of empty grey that's used arguably on both of them. This guy holds a bit more of a colour palette, and therefore I think maybe you look at him more, again with that nicer paint used. It's such a blocky set though. It's very square, lacking any kind of roundness, even from the Takara models, of like even a grapple perhaps. They're very noticeably square, and you notice it on Scavenger as well when you look at some of the arms. And whilst I've said a lot about Fanstoys liking the slender arms, and you've seen my review of Sound Blaster recently when I talk about that, it is still just very square, and you really do notice it. They're just very blocky figures, very side-on block as well. And it's by no means bad, but you can just really see the approach they're going down. They're making very square bots to make a very large combiner, so it needs to store the weight. They're not going to go with a combiner frame like they did with Superion, so it needs to be resilient, it needs to be built well, but it really shows in the individual modes. I normally show you a typical Masterpiece car bot at this point, but I think this time I'll go with a mini bot and a Fanstoys one at that. This is Sea Spray, version 2. No real contest, but wow, that is a difference, isn't it? He's barely clearing his waist. Okay, mini-bot is fine, but again, maybe on the bit too larger side. I don't think we would have seen Sea Spray and the Constructicons too much alongside one another, but for my headcanon, I want him a little bit closer to a mini-bot than, say, standing shoulder to shoulder with Megatron. Now, I've just noticed something. I was going to replicate his pose of shooting Prowl unceremoniously through the chest on the shuttle, and to my surprise, his gun, which I do like, has only got a peg on one side. So he can't hold it in this arm, in this hand, which was the arm and the position that he shot from, his left hand. So this has happened before. Was it Ultra Magnus? I seem to recall you could only hold it in one hand, that Fanstoys did. Why wouldn't you make that a universal piece that you could use either hand? A little bit more plastic, but that's odd to me. Interestingly, their trumpet you can hold in either hand. You can see there's a part on that could be held in either direction. So if you're going to put grooves on both hands, surely you'd make it so the gun could go on both hands, unless I've got a defective copy. I mean, he probably could grip around it, but yeah, I just noticed that. That's strange. Okay, let's get this guy transformed up, shall we? And there he is, as a digger. Crane, excavator, whatever you want to call him. I will say that is a very good transformation. It is not hard. The instructions were fair towards it. Couple of bits you have to be a little bit, I don't want to say careful with. The tolerances being so tight, there's no floppy joints here. And you do have to push some pieces in hard, particularly around the arms and maybe getting the waist down. I'll show you some bits in a second. But overall, it's pretty good. I don't think there's any point in me putting it on the turntable. I can show you it more. Whilst I think this is probably the better of the two modes we've seen so far, it does have its limitations, but I do want to say the instructions were pretty good. Now, it comes with video instructions that everyone seems to be doing these days. On the back of the instructions, you scan the QR code, but it takes you to a Chinese website, which I cannot get to load. I don't know if that is a thing really in the Western world, but it didn't work, so I had to resort to the paper instructions. So, as I say, let's have a look at this figure. Very blocky, very square. Right. Let me get a couple of early negatives out of the way. No wheels of any kind. So, these don't move. They're just the legs from robot mode, but there's no even small black rolling wheels that we would see. So, this is just really sliding. Now, as with no waist rotation, no turning circle at the middle, so this is not going to rotate around to be a playable digger, if you see what I mean. The part that does move, and the part you would expect, is the digger arm, which actually has quite a good range of motion to it, even rotate side to side. I don't know if they can do that, but this one can. And the bucket as well. So you can get your digger motion on the go, which is nice enough. But okay, like I've said before with other transformable figures, what can you do with them? Like I said with Fanstoys Ultra Magnus, the big thing you could do with a truck in alt mode is to have it turn at the pivot point, left and right, and that couldn't do that. It couldn't get much of a turn at all. I feel the same with this a little bit. Like, the wheels wouldn't have been hard to do. Did they have to do them? No. But could it have turned? Could it have had a joint in to have it at a rotating angle like a real digger could? I don't think it's a hard thing, because that's... What else can you do with a digger? You can move its wheels, you can rotate its base, and you can rotate its arm. And so far, you can only do the one out of the three. If someone knows more that you can rotate this thing, fine. But I really don't think you can. One thing I want to show you quickly is the weapon storage around the gun. So you get the gun, and you fold it all the way back on itself, and then this peg, strangely, goes into the underside. You won't see it, but it's just there, plugs in there, and that's its weapon storage. Not the most attractive. You could argue he's shooting more in this mode, but I wonder, could it just have plugged in more traditionally towards the back here, perhaps, or I don't know, somewhere here. I'm not a fan of this gap in the middle where you can clearly see its combining hand. I'll talk more about that in a second. Could they not have done a panel that just closes? There's nothing in the instructions to say so. This panel here does. This folds over, as you can see. Could it not have a additional folding out panel to give that fully closed off look? Just the fact that you can see a robotic fist sticking up is a little unsightly. I don't hate it. I really don't. I like its kind of stocky nature. I do like the movement of the arm, and I very much like the transformation, but I do think it was just... Okay, I've done it, but now I can't do a lot with it in this mode, and so far from in terms of looks, I'd want to keep it in this mode, but it's got the less playability, the less articulation, less you can do with it overall. Now additionally, I want to mention about this for transformation. It doesn't say very well, but when it says push down for the hips to the legs to get this kind of full extension, it's talking around effectively the groin into the hips out here. You can see this gap that is now here. That would cascade up. That's the part it's referring to. Not so much pushing the hips down, and didn't want to put too much pressure on that. But yeah, try and push down from the crotch piece rather than the legs. It is a little awkward to see, and the instructions weren't entirely clear at this point. And also I want to show you this part of the back here. You can see this hinge movement. When it says to rotate out as this clips onto the side of the body, it wants you to keep this part fixed and then rotate the arm around. So whilst I don't do transformations in my videos, don't be surprised if there's some things that don't quite match up. I do really like how it looks. I think the weapon storage could have been a little better, and of course, shot caller, no surprise, nowhere to store the trumpet in this mode. I don't know if you'll see, but there inside the cab is a nice little chair and like handle stick used. Now I don't think there's a way to get this open, and I don't want to push it too hard in case it breaks, but nice little feature. I would have liked maybe a door that opens and closes. It very much just goes for that off the screen feel rather than a playable digger, if you see what I mean. Features here are limited. Okay, on to some comparisons. So again, I no longer have Gary in the collection, so here's a photo of it from when I reviewed it. I do not think Gary is a particularly attractive alt mode. Again, that kind of square brick really comes across with it. Maybe less so with Scavenger. It doesn't really scream as bricky, at least not to look at. I do like the accentuation around the digger element of Gary. And yeah, the digger element on Scavenger's fine as well. I don't know, there is quite a bit of a difference when you put them side by side. I think there is a very bland and just brick to Gary. I can't unsee it. And whilst I have a couple of issues with how Wright has been presented, with a lack of waist rotation in alt mode and in robot mode, and the fact you can only really move the hinge of the crane rather than anything else, I just think it looks a better piece and maybe does a bit more, even though Gary probably has the better articulation of the two. You can move the digger quite comfortably, and you can't really do a lot else with a shovel digger such as Gary is, other than moving it back and forward. But hey, at least he's got wheels. And here he is alongside X-Transbot's Big Load. Bloody name. These two kind of were meant to be alongside one another, and this is again where I wish this guy had a kind of rotation that he could scoop stuff up and turn and put it in the back of long haul. It's a shame. I do love getting them in this kind of digger vibe. Just having a row of construction vehicles looks good, but look at the difference now on detailing. Look at the kind of flat paneling used. I don't necessarily say it as a slight, but this is obviously hyper-tune. Look at kind of the divots and the real worldisms of what this could be like an actual digger versus the Fanstoys version that goes for that very, very off the screen look. And it's a look they go for, I understand, but I find it fascinating that whilst these two do look very good together, I'm happy to keep them like this side by side. They almost couldn't be more different in their approaches. I've got to do it, haven't I? Alongside the Blockies Galaxy Defender Edition Scavenger. The only other crane I've got, really. I've probably got the G11 somewhere. That's great. I love these two. They're so small. You could probably fit in his little digger. It's proper take your son to work day, isn't it? No, that's really cool. Yeah, just for laughs, really. And finishing off with a typical Masterpiece Carbot. Well, typical in a sense, but it is Fanstoys Phantasm, their Mirage. Quite a bit of a difference. That probably is right, though. Formula 1 car to a digger. I don't really think I've seen too many of them side by side. But yeah, that probably is okay. I expect this to be a big alt mode. These things generally are. This is where I feel the size is better. Construction vehicles should be large. But I feel they're too tall standing in robot mode. That is Gary and Wright that have been released. But when it comes to alt mode, it's possibly a bit more forgiving. They're on a larger scale. This is just to show you a carbot for reference. Okay, let's get this guy in his arm mode, shall we? And there he is. As an arm, I will say I am commandeering a stand from Action Edition Megatron. You might remember from my video of that. The arm is obviously this part and he's holding on to here. Just to show you a bit of an upright pose. Anything that was good about the transformation into alt mode was more or less undone by getting it into this mode. Not that it's vastly different. I mean, the arms go in the same place, the hook goes further back, or the excavator, the digger. These are faux tyres, not my favourite look of him, but you can kind of work out where things are. The engineering to get the legs round and to clip them onto themselves using like a mid-leg release connection, all very good engineering, all fairly tight, all fairly secure. I am not a fan of this wrist forming, how it cascades out, how it's very flimsy. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's not a sturdy connector, and I thought it would be. I'll get it in for a closer look and I'll show you what I mean, but yeah, I spent much longer than I thought I would putting it into this mode, and that was mostly because of this part, making sure I had it in the right place, making sure it could reach all of these little connection points on the way. It's very big, it's very sturdy, it is impressive, a bit like how Gary was for leg mode. But yeah, how easy and a breeze it was to get it into digger mode was surprisingly not so to get it into this mode. But let me show you what I mean if I take it off its stand. And just the size of this is huge. Look at that. Oh, that's come a little bit up. I think I've got that digger right. I really think I do. It's supposed to be a bit flush and I can't seem to cascade it all the way down. I think it's supposed to be in line with the cab. Now let me show you what I mean. This was hard work. You can just about see, if I get this right, or maybe you can't. There's a peg under there and there's a peg on this side. It doesn't line up with these grooves. There's actually no groove here for it to, it's about here. And it's supposed to protrude through like these ones would. And I've looked at other videos and that is the way it's supposed to go on. So why doesn't it have these grooves for it to go through? Unless I've done something wrong. But if I haven't done something wrong, then that is quite an oversight. Also, and I don't know if it's just me, the instructions didn't exactly tell you to rotate the waist around. By the way, waist rotation, who knew? I'll undo that at the end as well. But yeah, that's to get much more of the elbow flexibility. You can see how that's his head, that's his chest, that's his hips and waist, and there's his legs tucked in with this faux piece, which lived inside the body. I like the parts forming element. But it was just hard work getting it into like this position. Not that I dislike it at all. So very stiff ratchets there all the way around. Very nice purple used. It's just huge. Look at that, it's so big. Now I wanted to show this as well. The chest can slightly come untabbed a bit. Very stiff ratchet to show that's going to be effectively hinging out to the side. If you imagine that's going to be the connecting ports of the body. That is something that you can do. I mean, there's not too much else you can do. It does look quite good as an arm though, because you can easily imagine it as a piece of Devastator, but it's so big, it's so heavy, I'm going to put it down. Yeah, not much else to say, it just looks fabulous. Obviously there's a port on the hand, so it will come with a gun at some point. I don't really know how that's going to work. We've seen the drill hands. Yeah, not too much else to say. It's really good. I just wasn't a fan of that connector, and even putting it together still feels a little flimsy. I would have liked a more sturdy connector to it, but I do like that it's housed inside the robot. It's very weighty, very deft. Possibly the best mode of the three, but hard work getting it into this position. So what is my view on Ian Wright? I will keep him in arm mode, and whilst it might seem a bit of a weird way to end a video, I haven't really got the time to put him back in the robot mode to talk through some points. The arm mode, I'll start with it. It's incredibly imposing, and people may keep it like this till it turns up as a way of kind of maybe being built as it goes and then attaching the limbs. I can understand that. I also do still think that the combined mode has been prioritised, and whilst I possibly like this figure overall more than I hate it, I do still feel that the individual modes have been sacrificed. The arm, I'm not a fan of this connection. I think it has a flimsiness to it when you attach it. I don't like this midsection, assuming I've done it right, and I've spent enough time on it to make sure I did. I don't like the fact it doesn't latch in on all sections. Also, why is this one piece that's exposed at the back of the arm? Would it not make sense to go all the way around? I like the tension of the wrist and that even kind of detailing on the ball joint there. It's very mechanical. The elbow bend's good. It looks like there's going to be some good clearance to be had. The alt mode, as I said, is it the best mode? I think it probably is. I do like how it looks. I think it just missing some basic ingredients. I think it should be able to turn at the middle to allow for the crane movement. But of course you're actually then turning the centerpiece of the chest, which doesn't detach from the back of the figure to do so. That can't have been too hard to engineer, I wouldn't have thought. It's nice enough. Do I not like the fact that there are no wheels? It doesn't move at all, and if you want to drive it along, you're literally sliding it across the ground. I mean, it doesn't exactly feel premium, does it? Again, talking of this, I was not a fan of these faux parts, these green side panels that are supposed to be like faux tyres. And getting them in hand, whilst you don't notice them as much because they are quite small, it doesn't look great. It just looks very basic. Could they at least done some detailing to make them look like proper tyres? But again, this is hyper-toon harming the figure. I will say I probably criticised this figure quite a lot in this video. And look, Fanstoys fans, it's okay to be objective around Fanstoys products. Not everything needs to be the best thing in the world. It's okay to say they've missed a step. But I do like it more than I dislike it. I do like this figure over Gary. I think Gary left me feeling very unimpressed, and this has things about it that I was perhaps more impressed than I thought I would be. I think the robot mode has got its benefits, its plus points, even if he doesn't have the most attractive faceplate to be sculpted to, and I don't like his massive backpack. I can't overlook that massive backpack. It looks very unsightly, but the articulation's fair, the paint is lovely as we expect, and the tolerances are very tight, which actually lends it to a good transformation into alt mode as well. Overall, I do like this. My nitpicks are there and will stay there, but I think this is so funny. The shithousery with X-Transbots, with this now out, look who's dropped a new figure. As of today, we have seen X-Transbots launching, or at least soon to be releasing, seemingly, their own Scavenger. This is just not going away, is it? Now, I think for the minute it's still X-Transbots winning this war, but there's enough figures to come out between now and then, and the proof will be in the pudding when it's all said and done, and it's got enough time to change. But we'll see. We'll see. I am just intrigued. There's tit-for-tat stuff with the trumpets and which figure's going to come out next and who did it better. You've got X-Transbots fans against Fanstoys fans. It's okay to like both. I mean, I'm probably going to be collecting both now at this point. Expensive hobby. The instructions are pretty good. The accessories are fair. The transformation into alt mode was quite straightforward. I think this could have been done better. Otherwise, that's kind of it. You can't really say too much more. I think when it's going to be a squad of 6, he's going to look good when more of them are released, when you get them all side by side. We've only got 2 out so far. If we're going to start to get, I don't know who's next. Is it Hook that they've teased? I think that's going to be looking a bit more in keeping. I might even keep them alongside the X-Transbots ones. At least I've got 3 individual characters so far. But I do like it. Good weight, very solid build on an arm mode. I just wish there's a couple of things they tightened up a bit better, and I do wish they didn't sacrifice the individual modes. Yes, they have. Based on this, I give this guy 3.5 for the star badges. Again, it's not that I hate it. There's things about it I do like. There's things about it I like more than I expected to. I just do think there's some fundamental things that have tripped it up. Yes, there is a waist rotation for the robot mode, as I've since found out getting it into this mode, but you'll have to take a lot of kibble out of the way. I think the backpack could have been cleaner for robot mode. That's not going anywhere. I think the missed articulation for alt mode, it just looks a bit sacrifice. It's a word I keep coming back to. And whilst I like the arm mode, I'm just not sold on this connector. That's just my points, very much my first impressions that I'm still going to carry with me and I can't necessarily oversee. But the selling points, the paint, the weight, the articulation, in as much as, well, it's got fair articulation for robot mode. The typical things that Fanstoy do well are well here. They're presented well here. So whilst I do like it, yes, I might not love it, but I do still like it. And there we go. That is my review on FT-32B Wright, Fanstoy's version of a G1 Scavenger. I'll put some photos up at the end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the subscribe button, because I will see you on the next one.